Hi, Bob Morrow from emailhomes.ca and Venture Property Investments again. Wanted to talk to you about the expectations for what happens after the lockdown. Again, just my opinion, but these are based on some studies I've been doing lately. One of the things I want everybody to check out is if you haven't found this website yet, you got to go check it out. It's roominfo.com. That's spelled R-H-E-U-M info.com. R-H-E-U-M info.com. Dr. Andy Thompson runs it, and some of the stuff he puts up there is quick, fast, down-to-earth facts, and they are very good. And it gives you hope if you're in any kind of a desperate state. It tells you and proves to you why they think this thing's going to end, probably June, July, and why they think that. One of the best things to take out of that, one of the things I did, is that when we get down to single-digit deaths every day, as morbid as that sounds, when we're down to 3 or 4 weeks of having single-digit deaths, that's when we're going to open up. So right now we're getting double digits nationwide still. So we're not there yet, but we're slowing the curve because it's coming down. So we need to make sure that it goes down to singles. Ray Dalio is another guy that I'm sure most of you have followed. He's a global macro investor, and he talks about the growing debt that the country's going to have afterwards and how it's going to be handled. And it's considerably a little more complicated than even I can understand. But basically he's saying that some of that debt is going to be written off. So it's not like the country is going to go into a major depression because the government simply isn't going to pay some of that. Now, that's simplifying it greatly, but that's essentially what's going to happen. All this money that's coming to us for CERB, for example, the Emergency Response Fund, a lot of that was already there, and we needed the Quarantine Act and the Emergency Acts and so on forth to allow that money to be freed up. But also, if the money wasn't there, the governments, as they did back in the other depressions and back in the World War, they just kind of printed money and made it available to the people so that we could get past this. And then the governments dealt with it, in their own way later. What will cause, though, is that there's going to be a bigger gap between the wealthy and the poor. The middle class is going to get kind of the worst hit on this because they're the ones who have lost their jobs. They're the ones, perhaps, who are running small businesses that are going to die or have already died. And what are these folks going to do? So they're either going to, miraculously change the way they do things and become wealthy, or they're going to move down into the lower income classes. And we're going to have a market where that gap is considerably different. So for real estate, that means a lot of those homes for the middle class income people will be available to us. The biggest thing that I got out of Dalio's latest speech is that we are going to have to become more adaptable and be more inventive. Now, adaptability is something that real estate investors are very good at. So we're going to just learn how to adapt. Now, we're not going to have to change necessarily everything we do. I think what might happen is the government's going to put in some more restrictions based on the fear of a pandemic resurgence. So there are going to be more rules and regulations in the way we build our units for separation and things like that. One example that my friend Andy Tran brought up was that we may not have shared furnaces anymore because that is shared air and that could be dangerous. So we might have to have two separate furnaces, but more on that later and not something we need to be concerned about now, but that is one of the ways we would adapt. Inventiveness, of course, is us looking at things and saying, how can we do this differently? Third suites in a property now is something that's only just started, just before COVID-19. So I think that's something we're going to look at. We're going to look at properties that currently we're going to turn into 2 suites, but we know that we have the availability in the room and we're in a city where it allows it, where we can put in a third unit at some point in time to make that property even more valuable. The last thing I wanted to talk about was mortgage debt. A lot of rental properties can't be deferred. The banks aren't deferring them. Some people are able to do that. I don't really understand why some can and some can't, and you need to talk to your bank about that, or your broker. Dahlia, one of our mortgage brokers, has some great webinars going on right now. Look her up because she's talking about this very thing. But I think if we defer payments, and those deferred payments are going to show up sometime, they're not being locked on to the end of your mortgage, extending your mortgage from 25 to 30 years, they're going to come up at one point and say, okay, now you're going to make your payments again. What are you going to do about this lump sum that we deferred, that we've also put interest on? How are you going to pay it? Well, if you don't have the money immediately to pay all that, then that's going to have to be turned into a loan, because, guess who's going to make the most money out of this? It'll be the banks. They're going to want their money, and if you can't pay that deferred payments right away, then they'll just turn it into a loan. They won't tack it on to the end of your mortgage. They'll turn it into a loan. Again, I'm not an expert, and I suggest you talk to Dalio or whoever your mortgage broker is to verify this, but that's the way I'm seeing things happen. So that gives you an idea of what to expect in a lockdown. I've talked about what we think real estate will happen. I think there's going to be price increases. I think it's going to be a balanced market, neither a seller's or a buyer's necessarily. If anything, it'll be a seller's market. We're going to see a lot of bidding wars, and we're not going to see any decrease in prices. If anything, it's going to be an investor-rich market, because we're going to have lots of inventory. The only downside is we're going to be in bidding wars, but as most of you know, I can win most of those if you're with me, and we just need a good strategy to make sure we do them. Bottom line is these homes have to be cash flowing all the time, otherwise we walk away.